Okay, the playoff matches are in, and so I'm going to go through these and make my predictions on who I think is going to win each round. Obviously, everyone's interested in Man City versus Real, so we're going to save that to the end. Um, so the first matchup, Brest versus. Oh, okay, this screwed up. I'm just gonna put myself over here, I guess. I'll put myself over here in the middle. Brest versus PSG. So Brest finished 18th in the Champions League. PSG was 15th. But I think that was just obviously mainly in terms of their schedule. PSG was number one in France right now. Brest is eighth. And I mean, PSG, I mean, people are talking about like Mbappe leaving, and obviously that had like a huge effect, but they still have a good squad. They have Ishraf Hakimi, Marquinhos, Vitinha, Fabian Ruiz. I've always liked him back in his Lazio days. Farorechka, Dembele. This is a solid team, and I one thing I think is important is to look at who they've beat and who they've lost to. And Brest, I mean, if you look at this, they haven't really beat anybody, right? They've beaten Salzburg and they've beaten Lyon, right? But they've lost to every single good team that they played. They've tied Leverkusen, tied Juventus. This isn't a really impressive CV. That being said, like PSG doesn't really have an impressive CV either. They've only really beaten Girona, Monaco, City. I mean, is not really the city of old, Brest and Salzburg, but they have beaten Brest. Brest has lost to PSG in the past. I think PSG are going to try to make a statement in this game, and they're just going to try to win it 4-1. So that's my prediction. Um, okay, let's move on. Monaco versus Benfica. Monaco right now is 17th in the Champions League. Benfica is 16th. Monaco is third in the French league, and Benfica is second in the Portuguese league. I think that because of PSG, we kind of think of, as the French league as being part of like the Big Five, just being kind of like a little bit of a stepbrother to the other four leagues. But it really is the Big Four, and then you have the four other leagues, which are Portugal, Holland, Belgium, and France. Like, I really do not think this league is on par with the other leagues. So third in France and second in Portugal, I think is kind of similar. If we look at who Monaco has actually beaten this year, they have a win against Barcelona, which I think is really, really impressive, especially because Barcelona is having an incredible season this year. But the other teams are Bologna and Aston Villa. Aston Villa have lost a lot of big games. They're not really the Aston Villa that we've seen last year. And if you look at their losses, they really lose against all good teams, right? Inter, PSG, Arsenal, and they lost against Benfica as well, right? So Benfica have already beaten them. Benfica, on the other hand, they've beaten Atletico, which I think is always like a punch above their weight type of team. They've beaten Portico, Monaco, and Juve. They tied against Bologna, but they also have like a really long record of teams that they've lost to, right? Barcelona, Braga, Sporting, Bayern, and Feyenoord, right? So if you use the transitive property of Barcelona, then Monaco is going to win. But again, these two teams have faced against each other. I think Benfica, is always like a really gritty team. I think they beat Monaco 5-3. I think France's storybook season is over this very quickly. Um, Club Bruges. Club Bruges is 24th in the Champions League. They're pretty much the last team to come in. They're second in the Belgium League. Atalanta is third in the Champions League, is ninth in the Champions League. So you have the last to come in and the last to get out into this group, or the first one to get into the group, and they're third in Italy this year. I think Atalanta are always just like a really feisty team that they can always punch up really well. So if you look at who Bruges has beaten, they've beaten Aston Villa. Again, Aston Villa seems to be losing to everybody. And Sporting, they've lost to BVB, Borussia Dortmund, Milan, and City. They haven't really beaten anybody good. But Atalanta hasn't really either. I mean, Napoli and Milan, but those are all like league games. Those can go either way. They've tied Barcelona, Juve, Lazio, and Arsenal, and they've lost to Inter, Real, and then Inter again. So, I mean, I don't think there's even though these are people on two different sides of the standings, I don't think there's that much of daylight between them. I think the standings are deceptive because again, like these teams are playing like everybody's schedule is custom, right? So like you know, it's not like the NBA standings, right? These standings are predicated just on much on who you're playing as how good you are. So that being said, I think that Atlanta beats Club Bruges 3-2. Probably the home leg at Bruges is like a 2-2, and then Atlanta wins like a 1-0 at home. That's kind of what I'm seeing. So now here we have Sporting versus Dortmund. Sporting is 23rd in the Champions League, the first in the Portuguese league. Dortmund is 10th in the Champions League and 10th in the German league. I like I think that we kind of have this bias towards like teams that we have like more name recognition towards, and like because so many great players have come from Dortmund, most recently Haaland, but also like Christian Pulisic, Dembele, Robert Lewandowski, like they're kind of always in the headlines, but I think that they're really kind of hobbling this year. I mean, they have Sabitzer, who's getting up there in age. How old is Sabitzer? He seems like, yeah, he's 30 years old. He seems to always be like one of those stars that's about to come up who never actually comes up, right? He got kicked out of Bayern Munich because he was supposed to be like the replacement, but that never happened. Gio Reyna, who, I mean, his career, is going sideways, up and down all over the place. Emre Can, who's one of my favorite players, but he's really old right now. And then we also have, what's his name? Daniel Malin coming off the bench in this lineup, which I thought was kind of weird, but I couldn't find one in which he started. So Sporting have beat Porto, City, Benfica. They've tied to Bologna and PSV, and they've lost to Leipzig, Bruges, and Arsenal. Dortmund, they've been in Villa, Eintracht, Bruges, Celtic, Leipzig, but there's not really a good team amongst these, right? They tied with Bayern and Villarreal, and they've lost to VfB, Real, Barca, Bayern, Eintracht. They lose to pretty much every good team. I think that they're pretty hobbled. I don't even think they make the Champions League next year, to be honest with you. And I think that they lose this game. Oh, I didn't. Oh yeah, I think they lose this game 3-1 to Sporting. I think it's pretty simple. All right, so let's move on. Celtic versus Bayern. I mean, we don't really have to talk too much about this. Celtic have only beaten Rangers and Young Boys. Bayern have beaten Leipzig, PSG, Benfica. I think, this is just. I think that if you've been following me for a while, you know that my perpetual feeling about Bayern is that they're a team that's really good on paper, but is never really able to make anything happen. If you look at this, all of these players would start on any other team in the Champions League, right? Pretty much every single one of these players would start on any other team, except for Reimer probably wouldn't. Maybe depending on the team, Coman and Sane probably wouldn't, but there'd be heavy rotation guys on pretty much any team, right? But they just never really put it together. There's the curse of Harry Kane, which I believe strongly in. So I think that what they do in this game is I think they do a beatdown of Celtic, and everybody's like, oh, look how good Bayern is, and then they skate past the next team 3-2, and then they lose in the next round. That's what Bayern seems to always do, and that's what I think. I think it's gonna be an 8-1 beatdown. We're close to what everyone's looking forward to, which is City versus Real, but let's just get it through. Feyenoord, Milan. I really like Milan. I think that they're a great team. I love Hernandez. Obviously, I love Rafael Leao, Tammy Abraham, Musa is great as well. And then obviously Christian Pulisic, right? Yeah, he still plays for Milan. I don't know why he's not on this 11 that I pasted, but they're a really good team. They're 7th in Italy. I think that they make a run and they end up in the top 4 again. Feyenoord are fourth in Holland. I think seventh in Italy is obviously like a lot more impressive than fourth in Holland. They've beaten Girona, which Girona is a shell of itself from last year, but they've beaten Inter twice, Juve, Real, and Bruges. They've lost to Liverpool. You know, you can't really blame them. They've lost to Leverkusen, and then the rest of these kind of make sense. Feyenoord had not really... I mean, they've beaten Bayern, but I don't really have a lot of respect for Bayern. So, yeah, I think that this is going to be 4-2 Milan. I think it's probably going to be like a 3-1 the first game or 3-0 the next game. Or I... Let's say this. I think Milan go into Feyenoord and win and tie 2-2, and they come home and they win 2-0. That's kind of how I see this happening. All right, Juve, 5th in Serie A versus PSV, 14th Champions League, 1st in Eredivisie. I know I switched between using countries and using the names of the league. I apologize for that. Juve seem to like just be like every single game that they play seems to be really gritty. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. We're like, you know, it's a bad thing for league play. I think this is the reason why they're fifth in Serie A, although I think they sneak it at fourth. Because, like, if every game you play is gritty, then, like, even the games that you should run away with end up being gritty. But the good thing about every game being gritty is that you can play against the good teams and, like, make those games gritty, which is kind of weird because, like, Yildiz is an amazing player. I think he's going to be, like, a future star. Obviously, Thuram is amazing. I think Koop Miners has a horrible name, but he's a really good player. And you look at Juve's CV, you know, they beat in Milan, they beat in City, they beat in Lazio, Leipzig, PSV. They've only really lost to Benfica, Napoli, and Milan. PSV, their best win is Liverpool, but they played against Liverpool's like under 21 squad. And then besides that, you know, they beat Feyenoord, they beat Girona, but they don't really have any good wins. But again, like Juve seem to make every single game of theirs really gritty, so I think Juve only wins like 3-1. Probably, you know, like 2-1. 2-1 at home, and then like 1-0 at PSV. All right, City versus Real. This is the thing that we're all waiting for. City is twice 2 in the Champions League, and they're 4th in the Premier League. Real is 11th in Champions League and 1st in not Serie A and La Liga. I think that like the funny thing about this matchup is that they're both like having, you know, they're both known to be having terrible seasons, but like Real Madrid's first in La Liga, they're even beating Barcelona. And City has gone back up into Champions League. I think at one point they were 7th, but they're now back up into 4th. I think that like don't look now, but Manchester City are actually having a quietly good 2 months. So let's look at their results for the last like 2 months. I might just be completely making this up, but yeah, so let's look at this. So they beat Club Bruges, they beat Chelsea, they lost to PSG, which is not good. They were ever since this Ipswich win, I think that really turned them around. They beat West Ham, they beat Leicester. Yes, they tied Everton, but I think ever since this time, they really have like turned a switch, and I think that Manchester City are going to end up probably in like second or third place in the Premier League. Hopefully they don't win it. So their record up until now, I don't think is really indicative. And I actually think that given their trajectory right now, I think that they're actually going to have a really good shot against Real Madrid. One thing to remember is that the last 3 times that these two teams have gone up against each other, the winner of this matchup has won the Champions League. Twice Real Madrid and once Manchester City. So just on its face, I think that I actually think that Manchester City is the better team the way that they're playing right now. The one huge problem for Manchester City, in my opinion, is that like if you look at Manchester City's schedule versus Real Madrid's schedule during the Champions League, right? So Real Madrid is playing Atletico on the 8th. They're first in La Liga, so it doesn't really matter that much, right? Then they're placing Real Madrid, and then they have a gimme against Osasuna, and they're placing Real Madrid again, and they're placing Girona, which again they can lose, doesn't really matter, right? So like they could very easily rest players, give people rest, do all these types of things in order to really put their focus on this match, right? Let's compare this to Manchester City. So they have a cupcake against Leyton Orient, which is good, but then they have Real Madrid, they have Newcastle United, they have Real Madrid again, and then they have Liverpool after that, and they have Tottenham right after that. So they have a really, really tough February. And the question is, for Pep Guardiola, is do you, like, what do you care about more? Do you care, like you're in that position right now where you have to decide, like, do you care more about winning the Champions League, or do you care more about making sure that you make the Champions League next year? Like, what do you think is a higher priority for you, especially with Rodri out for the entire season with an ACL, right? So it's not like the reason why you're faltering is not going to change, right? So I think that there's a good chance that Pep Guardiola might just say, hey, I'm just going to focus on I'm just going to focus on the Premier League. Who cares about Real Madrid? However, taking that into consideration, there's actually a complete opposite way of looking at this schedule, which is him basically saying, like, look, the way to win the Premier League, and you can see this going back years, right? The way that Manchester City has always won the Premier League has not actually been by beating up on the good teams. Manchester City is actually historically underperformed when it's come to good teams, right? They've always won the Premier League by understanding that 3 points against Liverpool is worth just as much as 3 points against Wolverhampton Warriors, right? So you look at last year, right? They lost against this was in the cup, right? But like, where are we at? So they tied against Arsenal. Can you see this? Yeah, they tied against Arsenal. They tied against Liverpool. They tied against Chelsea, right? They beat Tottenham, but like the way that they won last year was not. They lost against Villa. They tied against Tottenham. Was not by beating all of these good teams. So Pep Guardiola could actually look at this and say, okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put up sort of a fight against Newcastle, but I'm going to leave it all on the field against Real Madrid on the 19th, and then fine, I'll lose against Liverpool, and I have a week to rest against Tottenham Hotspur. And I think that might actually be what he does, is he just throws in the towel against Liverpool, says, you won the league, whatever, who cares? I just care about getting top four, and, I think that might be what he's going to do. So that being said, I think we have City versus Real. City win 4-3. I think that they do like a 1-1 at City, and then I think that Pep Guardiola goes into Real Madrid and wins 3-2. So these are my predictions. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram at PLLSKI. Thanks.